Hello, and a huge special shout out to the incredible freshmen of Romblon State University's San Fernando campus. I am so excited to be with you today. Seriously, this entire explainer was put together especially for you, to help you kickstart what I promise is going to be an amazing adventure. So, we're going to talk about history. But hey, let's forget about just memorizing a bunch of names and dates. That's not what this is about. We're going to think of it like an adventure, a quest even. Because from this moment on, you're not just a student, you're a history detective, and this is your guide to unlocking the past. All right, here's our map for today. First, we'll get you set up with your historical toolkit. Then, we'll dive into the actual craft of being a history detective. We'll even put those skills to the test by exposing some famous historical fakes. After that, we'll talk about something really important, how we tell our own Filipino story. And finally, we'll get you ready to start your own journey. Sound good? Let's go!
Yeah, you heard me right. I'm calling you future historians, because that's exactly what you have the potential to be. See, this isn't just about a subject in college. It's about gaining a kind of superpower, the power to look at the world around you, to understand where we all came from, and to see how that shapes where we're going. And your quest, it starts right here, right now. Every adventurer needs their gear, right? A detective needs their magnifying glass, and a historian needs their sources. These historical sources are the most important things in your toolkit. Getting a handle on these is really the first big step to becoming a sharp, critical thinker. So, first up in your toolkit are what we call primary sources. Now, the easiest way to think about these is to imagine them as eyewitnesses to a historical event. They were made during that time. This is the raw stuff, the direct evidence with no filter. It's as close as we can get to actually being there. So, what do these eyewitnesses actually look like? Well, they can be really official things like government documents or the minutes from a meeting, but they can also be incredibly personal. Think of old letters, diaries, or even just a photograph from that era. Each one of these is like a little window, a snapshot that lets you peek directly into a moment from the past. Okay, next tool on the kit, secondary sources. So if primary sources are like the raw ingredients, the flour, the eggs, the sugar, then secondary sources are the finished cake. They're things created after the event by a historian who took all those raw ingredients, studied them, and then interpreted them to tell a bigger story. The textbook you read for class, that's a classic secondary source. So you can really see the difference here, raw material versus a finished product. For example, the historian Teodor Agancilo wrote his famous book, Revolt of the Masses. To do that, he had to dig through primary sources. He looked at old Katipunan documents, he interviewed veterans of the revolution. Those were his raw materials. His book, which analyzes all of that, that's the secondary source. Okay, pop quiz time. What do you think? A textbook, is it a primary or a secondary source? 99% of the time, you'd be right to say it's secondary. But, and this is a huge but, it all depends on what you're trying to study. If you're studying the Philippine Revolution, that textbook is secondary. But what if you're studying the history of education in the Philippines in the 1980s? Well, all of a sudden, that textbook from the 80s becomes a primary source. It's an eyewitness to how history was taught back then. See? Context is everything. Okay, so you've got your toolkit packed. You know the difference between your sources, but just having them isn't enough. You have to know if you can actually trust them. This is where you really put on your detective hat. It's time to learn the craft of historical criticism. First up is what we call external criticism. This is all about one simple question. Is this thing the real deal? Is it authentic or is it a fake? A good detective looks at the evidence. You check the quality of the paper. You'd analyze the ink. You'd even look at the words themselves. Does the language, the slang, the spelling, does it all match the time period it supposedly came from? You're basically asking, is this a forgery? Now, let's say a document passes that first test. It's authentic. Great. But now comes the really tricky part, internal criticism. This is about truthfulness. Just because a document is real doesn't mean it's telling the truth. Think about it. An official government report written in the middle of a war is definitely a real, authentic primary source. But is it truthful? Probably not completely, right? It's probably propaganda. A good historian always asks, who wrote this? Why did they write it? And what did they want people to believe? Okay, you're armed and dangerous now. You have the tools of criticism, so let's put them to work. It's time to meet some of the villains of Philippine history. These are the big hoaxes, the deceptions that have fooled people for decades. This is where being a history detective gets really fun. For a very, very long time, this was taught in schools as a fact. the Code of Kalantiaw. It was supposedly this very advanced set of laws from a pre-colonial chief, Datu Kalantiaw. It was written about in a famous book. It was even sold to the National Library. I mean, it seemed totally legitimate. But then, in 1968, a historian named William Henry Scott decided to investigate. He used his detective skills. He applied that external criticism we talked about. And he found a fatal flaw, anachronism. That's a fancy word that just means the words, the ideas, the punishments in the code, they were totally out of place for the 15th century. They just didn't fit. And with no other evidence to back it up, he proved it was a clever but modern fake. That is the power of good historical work.
Okay, here's another really famous claim. For many years, a central part of the story of Ferdinand Marcos was that he was this incredible World War II hero. The story went that he led a guerrilla unit called Ang Marlika and received all these medals for bravery. It was a really powerful story that a lot of people believed.
So how was this tested? Well, historians didn't just take the story at face value. They did that crucial detective work. They cross-referenced. They took the claims and compared them against other primary sources. In this case, official United States Army war records. And what did they find? Those records showed no proof that the guerrilla unit ever existed and no confirmation for most of the medals. By testing one source against another, the claim fell apart. This is why we can't just believe one source. We always have to check.
So, as you can see, these detective skills are about more than just debunking fakes. They let us ask a much bigger, more important question. Who gets to tell our story, and why are they telling it that way? And this leads us to something called historiography, which is basically the history of how our own Filipino story has been written over the years.
The way we tell our national story has changed a lot. At first, you had the Spanish view, what we call bipartite. They said we had a dark past until they arrived with light. Then our nationalist heroes like Rizal flipped that. They proposed a tripartite view, a bright, luminous pre-colonial past, a dark present under the colonizers, and a future where we'd find the light of freedom again. But today, there's another evolution in how we think about it.
And this is a really cool idea for your generation. It's called Pantayong Pananaw. It was introduced by the historian Zeus Salazar, and it basically means a for us, from us point of view. The idea is so simple, but so powerful. It says we should stop writing our history as if we're constantly trying to explain ourselves to foreigners. Instead, let's have a conversation among ourselves, as Filipinos, in our own languages, about our own past. It's about taking ownership of our story.
So, we've covered a lot of ground. We've packed your toolkit, we've learned the detective's craft, and it all leads to this. A historian's job isn't just to be a walking encyclopedia. It's not about memorizing facts. The real task is to organize the past in a way that creates meaning, in a way that gives us lessons for today, and helps us navigate the future we're all trying to build together.
And so, I'm gonna leave you with this question. The tools are yours now. You know the craft. You know how important it is that we tell our own story. So what are you curious about? What part of our unbelievably rich, complicated, and amazing Filipino past will you choose to investigate first? This is just the beginning for you. Your journey as a historian starts today. Thank you so much for joining me. And hey, to keep learning with us, please go and support your class's very own YouTube channel. It's called No Problem, Only Solution. More explainers are coming your way all semester long. Thanks again, and happy investigating.